Hey everybody. In case you're watching this right now as we're recording on LinkedIn Live or on YouTube Live, hey, thanks for being here. And if you're catching this on the replay, that's okay too. We're happy to have you. So today we're going to record episode 204. This is James Wheeler, my guest. Jake's not here today, but that's all right. We're gonna do just fine. I think you're gonna like this one. Okay, so what we do is I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, silent 2, silent 1, and then we'll get going. So, standing by, 5, 4, 3. Welcome to the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. This is episode 204. I'm your host, I'm Kip Boyle. Today we're doing something a little different. You know, usually Jake is here and I can depend on him to go off script at any moment, right? But he's not available. So, we're going to have to learn how to do this without Jake. It happens once in a while, but it's okay because I've got a special guest. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how CISOs and CFOs can actually have productive conversations about cyber risk. So, and I don't mean the awkward budget meetings or the jargon-filled presentation that makes the CFO's eyes glaze over and then they start checking their phone to try to figure out how they can get out of that, right? So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about real communication that over time leads to real decisions. And as I said, we have James Wheeler here. Now, James is a highly experienced CFO. He now owns and operates kept.pro, and that's his business, which provides United States-based fractional accounting teams to businesses all across the country. Now, he spent years on the receiving end of cybersecurity conversations. I know he still has them as an owner-operator of his own business. That's still a top issue for him, but he doesn't have a CISO to argue with. He has to argue with himself. So I thought it would be great for him to come on and share what works, what doesn't work, and what he wishes that more cybersecurity people understood about how to have this conversation. So James, welcome to the podcast. So glad you're here. Would you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Kip. I'm happy to be here, and absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm the founder of kept.pro. We provide US-based fractional accounting teams at businesses from 2 to 50 million typically in annual sales. And that's a very sort of specific niche with respect to cybersecurity, which I'm sure we'll get into in the episode. Before that, prior to 2020, I had a fractional CFO practice for several years. And before that, I was the full-time CFO for the US-based subsidiaries of a $1.5 billion publicly traded Australian company. So I've had opportunity to, as you mentioned, to have this conversation in a variety of contexts. And in the last 5 years in particular, with hundreds of companies sort of in that size, given the functional area that we're involved in.
Right, so in that $2 to $50 million range, yeah?
Yep, mostly.
Yeah. So, James and I have known each other for several years now, and we've had versions of this conversation, both over Zoom, also at lunch. And the one thing that just keeps coming up over and over for me was something that I heard James explain very early on when we were first getting to know each other. He talked about cybersecurity, but he contextualized it as a problem that was similar to carpets and diamonds. And I just, I love that story. So that's the first thing you have to do, James, is please explain the carpets and diamonds concept, from your point of view.
Absolutely. Kip, as curious as I am, as much as I love learning, I probably felt the way about carpet and diamonds when I was younger and starting out that most people do about accounting and finance. When you don't have someone you trust or you don't have effective heuristics for discerning trustworthiness, you end up learning a lot about carpets and diamonds one way or another.
Yeah, because it's a big purchase. You really don't know anything about either one of them. And like you said, you don't know who to trust. So how do you avoid making a bad purchase, right? I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. And I love that because cyber risk and cybersecurity is so abstract most of the time and ethereal. It's very difficult to make these things concrete. And I think that's why I loved your carpets and diamonds analogy so much, because I think it's something everybody can relate to. So that's what I want to talk with you about today is, how do you wrestle with this, with this issue? Because you don't want to become an expert. You do need to find somebody that you can trust. So let's start there. So what makes a CISO trustworthy in your eyes? What are your heuristics?
Well, I think that when we're talking about building or assessing credibility, for me, there's sort of four things I might look at with a CISO. I might look at their network, and then elaborate on that in a moment. Also, that's a pun. I'm just now realizing in this context.
I was going to say something.
I'd ask about their approach to cloud services. That's really near and dear to me in the segment that we're in, the size of companies we work with. I'd look at their experience collaborating across functional areas. CISOs really love to tell me that behavioral issues are really the weak link in a lot of companies. It's not about technology, it's about behavior. And so that makes it a cross-functional problem where the cross-functional collaboration sort of experiences, and do they align with that advice? And then fourth, compliance scenarios for which they've been accountable. Not necessarily specific frameworks, although that's great too. But why were they engaged at the companies? What was the most important thing at the companies that they were engaged with? And then what were the outcomes there? Kip, when I talked about, or when I referenced network being the first thing, that's so important, at least to me, knowing who a CISO would go to for penetration testing specifically, recovery or remediation, a civil legal investigation. Who do they know in law enforcement? What are their contacts in law enforcement when things go criminal, or they need additional resources that can be provided through that venue? And so being able to speak to those four areas is how I would look at credibility.
Okay. I think that makes a ton of sense, and I really appreciate that you never, I don't think you said anything about how well I type or, how good I am at setting, firewall rules. I noticed there was a distinct lack of technical evaluation in your heuristics. And I wouldn't be surprised if some people in the audience would find that to be head scratching, right? Because let's face it, most of us have come up through the systems, profession, and early on we got promoted because we knew how to, make the ones and zeros dance. But when you get to this level, a CISO, that doesn't matter anymore, really. And so I appreciate that you put a really thick line under the fact that there's other things that you're looking for. I love that. Now unless you were going to say something, I was going to turn the telescope around.
I mean, I was going to say it really can't matter, Kip. That technology is changing so fast, as you astutely point out in your book. That right, I need a CISO to be good at policy. I need a CISO to be good at collaborating cross-functionally. I need a CISO to know who to call when things go sideways. I need a CISO to know who negotiates with ransomware perpetrators.
Right.
If you want to go, or helps you make the decision whether or not to go that route.
Yes.
That's what I need. I don't need the technical side.
Yeah, that's great.
And I don't think it's possible to have both.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think maybe back in the day, possibly, right? I
Sure.
mean, when computers were not in the cloud and things were maybe a little bit more simple.
When everything was air gapped.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so now let's turn the telescope around. Let's look through the other end. So what makes you suspicious or skeptical when you're, considering, well, should I work with this CISO? Um, what are the tells for you there?
Uh, well, there's a couple big ones for me. One is bringing kind of the wrong tool for the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so that often manifests as enterprise level frameworks that are barely even appropriate, in the middle market or upper middle market, much less lower middle market
Oh,
or
I love that.
uh, small business space.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is bringing the wrong decade.
Mm.
Um, if you're a company under 100 million, probably large, especially depending on what industry, you could be almost exclusive. You could be exclusively cloud based, and
Mm.
so bringing a framework that focuses 99.9% on on-prem network security um, is a big tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even, first of all, let me agree with you. I particularly love the first thing you said because um, I've observed that when you try to take an enterprise level framework and use it in a mid market company or a smaller company, it's like trying to dress your son up, your 12-year-old son in your own suit. It just doesn't work. I mean, you can cuff it, you can, cinch it, you can throw a belt on it, but it's never going to work. The kid's not going to look good. And it's just going to be, yeah, he can't even walk around properly. So I love that one.
That's a great
And
visual.
yeah, well, again, it's just like, how do you make this stuff concrete? It's so important. So I love that one. And yeah, thank you for talking about the stuff that kind of makes you skeptical. One of the things that I find concerning by omission is if I ask somebody, well, what are my top risks, or what are the top risks of anybody, in my industry or something like that, and if they don't say phishing is one of those top risks, if they're just talking about the ones and zeros, I got to scratch my head at that one too, because that's just silly. Phishing's been an issue for over 20 years now, so it's like, where have you been?
Yeah.
Okay, so um, I want to talk about the communications gap, and I think people should not be surprised that this is where we're going with this conversation. And I just want to start out by saying I've spent years trying to solve this problem. It's actually why I wrote my book, Fire Doesn't Innovate, because what I learned in my first job as a CISO, I worked at an insurance company, and the CFO there, who I didn't report to, I actually reported to the CIO, was confused about my budget requests, and he wanted to be supportive, and so he brought me to his office one day, and he said, "You got to explain this stuff to me because it's hard for me to say no to you because I know how important it is, and yet there are other people asking for additional budget, and I know what they're going to use that money for. They're going to increase sales, they're going to increase market presence, and I get that stuff, but I don't really understand what you do." And so I was at first kind of put off, a little scared, but I actually realized that was a wonderful thing to happen for me. And so I took all those lessons and I put it in my book. And that's when I realized just like there's this massive communication chasm between technical and non-technical people in general. But in particular, I think a CISO and a CFO, when that communication chasm is yawning and isn't being bridged, then boy, that's not good for the business, right? So in short, what I learned is that I got to talk about business value and business outcomes, and I've got to talk about maybe what could go wrong in terms that they would care about. I had to learn about revenue and liability and reputation, and I needed to stop talking in ones and zeros, and I needed to make things that for me were sort of like oxygen, right? I'm breathing here. I have to explain that to you. and I had to actually figure out how to explain it. But I'm curious, that's my take of what it's like to be on my side of the chasm. Does that resonate with you? What do you think?
It does. And while you were just talking about that, actually, it made me think. One of the best ways to engage with the CFO. Everybody wants to be perceived as strategic, which means most people just put the word strategic somewhere in the copy.
That's right.
But if you can speak to second order economic effects, that's really what that'll elevate you with the CFO. So
Okay. Can you unpack that and tell us what that means to you?
I'm going to give it my best shot.
Thank you.
So if you're a direct to consumer e-commerce business, and you're are inexplicably doing transactions on-prem, and that infrastructure goes down, then that's a first order economic impact. You're going to lose sales for that day.
Right.
All right. If your helpline or your returns line telephony infrastructure goes down, that's gonna be a reputational hit for the customers that tried to reach you that day. That's not a first order economic impact. That's second. You're going to generate some ill will in the marketplace.
Okay.
By virtue of the fact that some number of customers couldn't get through to the helpline or the returns line or whatever.
Okay. They wanted some help and they couldn't get it.
Exactly. And that ill will, there will be an economic impact to that, but it's not going to be that day. It's not going to be that quarter.
Okay.
But you recognize that there will be. And that's the first step in having a conversation about the magnitude of that impact. Does that mean we spend 10% of gross revenue on, all kinds of redundancy for the helpline? Probably not. Well, definitely not to anybody paying attention to those numbers. Definitely not. But it's a starting point to talk about. Oh, okay. What is the actual magnitude of that impact going to be? But just demonstrating that you can think about second order economic impact, I think is going to be huge.
All right. So can I try right now?
Yes.
I'll try right now, but I'll try quickly. So if we were ransomware attacked, for example, and couldn't access our data, there's a lot of first order impacts, right? Like we can't sell, we can't fulfill orders we've taken, we can't even look up the orders that we have, and we don't know what's in the warehouse.
All right. But, same e-commerce business we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we also can't pay people. Like we can't run payroll. We can't pay taxes due. We can't pay suppliers. People in our facility who can't work can take, with their mobile phones, photographs of the ransom, on the screen, and can post it to social media and go, oh my gosh, we're under attack. And it just seems like, there's all these, it's not just I can't access my computer, it's all these other things too. Am I getting it? Am I
I'm surprised. I'm surprised anybody ever questioned your budget numbers. You went straight apocalyptic. You just went nuclear. I'm like, there's a nuance between first and second order economic effects.
And I blew it all up.
It's the end of the world.
Oh no! All right. Well, I'll try to be more nuanced.
But yeah, no. There were tons of examples in that scenario of first and then second order economic impacts, that was
okay.
A smorgasbord of impacts.
We aims to please. Okay. So I'm also curious. So what kinds of questions do you ask to determine whether somebody really understands your business or not? Right. So I'm a fractional CISO, and you're looking for one, and so you're interviewing me, right? And we actually did this at one point where you actually did interview me. But like, what's one or two things that that you're going to ask to get a sense for if they really get what you do?
I'm probably going to go right up the middle with why does this business have to have cybersecurity?
Mm.
And then what does that look like then? And there should be a connection between the business, why the business has to have cybersecurity, not should have or would like to have, has
Uh-huh.
to. And then what what types of things there should be a direct line between the why it has to have it and the
Uh-huh.
types of things or the types of approach that you would likely take as a result.
Okay. Now, on a related question, let's say that you find a CISO that you trust. They get your business. They're sharing the headspace, that with you that you want. How do you like cyber risks to be shared with you, or presented to you, or communicated to you? What makes the most sense to you?
Uh, I think of three things. Um, and in general, I like to see the relative relationship um, between things in each of these categories. So the relative probability of occurrence,
Hmm.
what's in our space, in our business, the industry, the size, the geographic location, the level of discipline or maturity that the organization has. What are the most likely types of occurrences, attacks, incidents, and the top sort of five, and how do you rank those against each other?
Hmm.
Second thing, the relative business impact of the occurrences or the incidents that you just ranked relative to one another. What is
Hmm.
the relative business impact of each of those?
Okay.
And that's where we can talk about first and second order economic impacts. And then third, the relative cost to mitigate. And that'll help us, or that'll help your CFO hone in on biggest bang for the buck, if
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah. Yeah, the term I use is business value, right? How do I know that every dollar I spend on these items is going to give me the greatest value in return? Because I've got a limited budget and I have unlimited risks. So I need to choose carefully. And I love your criteria. The one thing that I always struggle with, listening to what you prefer to see, is getting those hard numbers. It's very expensive and difficult in my experience to get the kind of data that I need in order to do a credible job of saying, well, this is the likelihood of occurrence. So anyway, so if anybody out there is listening to this and they're saying, I don't know where to get that stuff, I don't know where to get it either. It's really, really difficult in my experience. But I think that's one of the things where the CISO and the CFO have to work together, because maybe I can't provide what you would prefer. So how close can I come? And would the CFO give me the time to to look at what I can get and to help me choose what actually would meet the need? So that's great.
That's a real problem in a lot of. Can I comment on that?
Yeah, please.
That's a real problem in a lot of spaces, and uh, it's okay to say, look, the conventional wisdom is this: social engineering is going to get a $5 million company way before Tom Cruise comes through the ceiling with lasers and whatnot. Way before. That said, if you want to know, right? If you want a data source that says here's the probability of these different types of events happening in your
Hmm.
space for your size, this is what it might take to do that. We would need a budget just to answer the question about where to
Right.
spend money. We would need to spend this much. That's totally valid.
Good.
Coming at it from that perspective.
Oh, I appreciate that, because I think certainly, when I was more junior in my career, um, I think I'd be nervous to say something like that, that I would be judged as like, well, clearly you're not ready for the job, right? Kip, clearly it's because you don't have the answer. I'm going to need somebody else. Please step out of the way. I mean, I was nervous about that. So it's good to hear you say that. No, actually, it's pretty reasonable. I may not give you that money, but it's reasonable for you to say it.
Well, I mean, it's entirely possible. I'm not saying this is the case here, Kip, but it's possible that a relatively inexpensive report or consulting engagement could answer the question, and that would be, then you'd be the hero. It may not be an insurmountable sum,
Right.
in order to have that answer.
Yeah, I love it. That's one of the things I appreciate about you is that you're eminently practical about these things, and that is just so valuable to me. Now, one of the things that I think is that a CFO often has to, like a tough question they often have to answer is, are we practicing reasonable cybersecurity? Right? Because if something really terrible does happen, isn't it the case that most people see the CFO as also kind of the chief risk officer, right? Like, maybe if there was a general counsel, if your organization was big enough to have, a chief legal officer, perhaps they might be asked that. But have you ever been asked that? Do you think that's a reasonable question for a CFO?
I do, especially especially in the sizes of companies we work with. The role often rolls up to the CFO. I don't think that's super atypical depending on your industry and company size. And so, one, I think it's a reasonable question. Two, I think falling back on, well, they underwrote our cyber policy. So that's the first threshold of reasonableness. I think you've got to go further than that. Otherwise it looks like moral hazard. I suppose if you're falling back on cyber underwrote us. But yeah, I do think it's a reasonable question. It is a challenging question. It's a question I think every CFO has to wrestle with, even if they're not in charge of that function, just by virtue of the fact that they're handling the money, and they are responsible for accounting controls and policy. They're often going to be a part of that conversation, no doubt.
Yeah. So if I'm working with a CFO, I would expect them to say, well, yeah, Kip, they're going to ask me, but I'm going to immediately turn to you, right? Like there's a shared accountability here. You've got to stand there with me, and we have to be on the same page, and that trust, right? I have to trust you that when you say, yes, we were practicing reasonable cybersecurity, and that you can explain it to me in a way that I can understand and that I can say as well, because people are going to look at me too and go, is Kip right? or is he blowing smoke, right? So then that kind of leads me to another question I was going to ask you, which is about your role in cybersecurity oversight or cyber risk oversight. So, like, what keeps you up at night, if there is anything, with respect to cyber risk?
A lot, actually. I think most of the things that keep me up at night end up being conceptual or abstract, just because that's how I think. And so, honestly, the accelerating but wildly uneven rate of change in technology and culture is what keeps me up at night. We don't really stop to think about kind of the downstream impacts of our choices, because the future is too abstract and irrelevant under the kind of value creation mandate we've all subscribed to. For example, when I say the increasing rate of acceleration in technology and culture that's uneven, I'm regularly having conversations with companies, kind of $5 to $15 million, that have on-prem accounting systems and sticky notes with passwords, and I mean, and it's like they've been untouched by the last 20 years of the threat environment.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, the ability for criminal elements to scale and realize the benefits of scale and leverage emerging technologies is just increasing.
Yeah.
And it's the intersection of those two. The idea that a $4 million cattle feed wholesaler in Idaho is all of a sudden a really valid target and a cost-effective target for criminal enterprise, cyber criminal enterprise, is not a good recipe.
Yeah, the economics that we're used to, where if I attack a big company, like that makes sense to do that because it's going to cost me a lot to do the attack, and so I better choose a big target because I want a bigger payday. But then the economics are just totally flipped on their head, where it costs nothing to attack anybody. So why not?
Yeah, no, it's scary. It's kind of meta answer, but that scares me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a paradigm shift, right? And I see it all the time when I talk with leaders in companies who really do have the sincere belief that, well, we're too small or we don't have anything of value. They really minimize and trivialize the idea that they would be a target, which, of course, you've just explained why that's not valid these days. So let's shift. I want to talk about something that we actually opened up with, which was company size. And you had said, I think very smartly, that if somebody recommends bringing in a framework that really only works at a giant enterprise and they think it's going to work at a $50 million firm, like that's a red flag for you. Now, at the same time, let's go down even further. A $10 million construction company and a $10 million a year data analytics firm, even though they're at the same size, they're actually very different from a cyber risk perspective, right? And you work with businesses, across the spectrum. So I'm curious, what do you see? What's the difference?
Oh, goodness. Well, that is very true. And we have worked with companies, in the $20 million range that have a full-time CISO, highly qualified. And then we've also worked with $50 million companies that don't. And
why do you suppose?
One, the 50 million is in construction in this case. And the 20 million was dealing with PII.
Okay.
And HIPAA covered data. And so they needed different legal frameworks. They needed different security frameworks. They needed different operational frameworks. They needed a different level of rigor and awareness in order to maintain all that. You've got companies that have third-party requirements. If you're contracting with large public companies, if you're contracting with the government, completely different environment. And those end up looking a little more like compliance problems. So there's kind of the compliance element of cybersecurity, and then what I might characterize as the practice element of cybersecurity. We want to keep this contract, so we need to stay in compliance and have a documented business continuity plan that includes cybersecurity element. But we also don't want to, have the office manager wire several $100,000 to an offshore bank.
Right.
So that's more practice. This is more compliance.
Right. I like that. And it would explain why, even within the same industry, a $50 million manufacturing firm that sells to the Department of Defense versus a $50 million manufacturing firm that does not, even that's going to vastly, change the cyber risk posture that two otherwise identical organizations are going to have. And I've seen that a lot as well. So it's interesting how, as a CFO, it there's some nuance there, right? Just because I'm in the manufacturing sector doesn't mean that it's obvious how sophisticated I need to be with respect to managing my cyber risk. And then also just the different sizes of companies says a lot about tooling, right? Just going back to this idea that, well, if I can't take a cybersecurity framework that works well in a large enterprise like a Boeing or a Microsoft or something like that, well, what do I do in the middle market, right? Or if I'm a small organization, what do I do? And I remember, I remember you said one time, you're like, well, in a really small business, you just let Jesus take the wheel.
I can't believe you did me that way, Kip.
But I've seen that.
It is true to a degree. Very small businesses that don't have sales figured out, they don't have assets, they don't have brand value. They need to figure those things out
Right.
first. If they spend $1 on cybersecurity expertise, unless it's central to their business model, the opportunity cost is just too great.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are those businesses out there like that for sure.
And I've seen it myself. So I've seen, in fact, we just recently landed a new customer. They're a venture capital fueled entity. They're pre-revenue, but they knew from the start that they were going to need a SOC 2 Type 1 and then eventually a SOC 2 Type 2 report. And we're already under contract with them to help them get that because of the nature of their work, and they've already had preliminary conversations with their target market. And so right off the bat, but I think that that's a case where the SOC 2 report is part of achieving the product market fit that they need in order for their business model to actually work. Whereas with, if you start a pizza parlor, no. Nope. Your biggest mistake is writing down the credit card numbers in your ledger. So yeah, cool. So do you have any sense of when cyber risk really starts to become something that, okay, I've got product market fit now. Is there anything else that really has to be in place before a company says, we really do need to grow up on this cybersecurity stuff?
Oh, that's a great question. If we've done anything in this conversation, it's really sort of explore the boundaries, the multiple dimensions of exception to any kind of rule around that. But let's see. I would say, initially, as I just hinted, I would say it depends. It depends, but that's a cop-out. And
so what does it depend on, James?
It's going to depend on the business case, the economic case being in favor of investment in cybersecurity. Whether that's, hey, this is central to our business model and finding product market fit, like you just described, whether this is central to our business model, we're a government security contractor or a defense contractor, whether it's this is the level we need, just because the amount of money at stake and the people's lives that we touch by virtue of how many employees we have, and we need something we're getting ready to go public, and this is a part of that.
Yeah, I love that. I've seen that. I've seen all of those things in action.
Yeah, and so there's what do they call it, the forcing function. Right, until companies hit that, and it's going to vary, right, until they have to have it, which is why I phrased it the way I did.
Yeah.
When I'm asking, when I'm talking to a prospective CISO, why does this business have to have this? It's just so context dependent,
right?
And understanding that, I think, really critical to being effective in cybersecurity.
Okay, I will just add two things to the list of how do you know when you got to get serious about it. And I think one of them is customer requirements, supply chain pressure. That's actually becoming
It's a
more
good
of a
one.
thing these days than it ever has been before. I have more people coming to me and saying, my biggest customer won't sign the renewal, or I can't land this big customer that would change our economics for the better until I can deal with this thick, dense data security addendum to the contract, and I have no idea what this thing says. So that's coming up a lot. And then the other thing is coming up a lot is you actually get ransomwared and you didn't expect it. Or your friend across town that you have coffee with every now and then, he got ransomwared, and you can see the bags under his eyes.
Yeah.
He's got no sleep, and he can't stand what he's going through, and he swears he'll never let it happen again. And that's a lot of people call us and say, you know, hey, I did a guy I knew just had this happen to them. I don't want to go through that. What do I have to do? Anyway, so those are two things I just thought I would add.
That's so true. I mean, it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt.
Yeah, and there's a real lack of reporting on just what how bad cybercrime can mess you up. There's a real lack of reporting on that, and I think that's not helpful.
How this is one of the things that that shocks me, Kip. My inbox is full of AI generated sales pitches, and also AI can't do jack bibbity boo about my inbox. So there's that, and you just touched on something that, like, I don't understand how reporting isn't there for this type of thing.
Right.
And why is that? What's driving that?
Well, if that's a serious question, I can actually give you at least a partial answer. Well, because it's really for the same reason why most forms of crime are not reported. Now, the more serious forms of crime, where somebody gets bodily injured, death, massive, theft of property, those things tend to get reported because they're just so catastrophic. They're just so enormous. But the smaller stuff, like somebody stole my wallet, somebody tried to rape me, those things are small enough, and the shame factor is pretty huge, that it deters people from reporting them. In this case of cyber, I've seen estimates from police organizations that as little as 10% of cybercrime is reported. It could be as much as 40%, but think about it. If the numbers we're seeing are huge, and if we're only seeing somewhere between 10 and 40% of what's really going on out there, oh my gosh. But that's what I know about, why people don't report. And I think if you flip the script, the other reason why people don't report is, well, where exactly do you report? If I want to report, who do I tell?
Yeah.
That's not obvious.
And, well, maybe another episode on that, because I just feel myself getting fired up.
We don't have any governance in that. So, but now let's talk about some specifics, okay? So let's talk about, the smaller companies. Now, do they really have to be, concerned about zero-day exploits and, nation-state hackers? I mean, for the organizations you serve, like, what do you see? What's realistic to be concerned about?
Nation-state hackers is an interesting phrase. Would you include nation-subsidized, at least through safe harbor, large-scale organized crime?
I would.
Then yeah, I do think that small businesses need to be concerned with that. Okay. The actual manifestation of that with small businesses comes back to some pretty basic best practices around having 2FA turned on and regular training and enculturation for vigilance with employees with systems access. That said, they've come close to getting me a couple times in the last 10 years. stories I'm happy to share if you or your viewers would be interested.
Yeah, let's hear one anyway. What one that you feel comfortable telling?
Oh goodness. Well, the more I think compelling one, since I'm on the televisions, is probably around. There was a firm where I was the CFO. I was fractional CFO type role, and their email had been compromised, and their CEO's email had been compromised, and his calendar had been compromised. And so I started getting communications from the CEO, ostensibly, in their voice, with knowledge of their schedule.
Wow.
Yeah. And they did a great job at elevating the sense of urgency and crisis. And I kept responding to these communications, like, the wire's ready to go.
So you still thought it was real?
I did. I did. I held out for the possibility it was real. His voice, his email, knowledge of the schedule. It wasn't what was being asked for was not out of the ordinary, particularly.
Okay. So the pieces
we just had one.
fit together.
There was just one step where I said, our policy is like, you need to reach out to me. You need to call me on my cell phone, which you have. It's not on my signature, and authorize this. Well, I'm in a meeting with this, the chief executive officer of General Electric or something, something intimidating, and
right.
You need to get this done and this and that. I was like, if you want this, and so finally, I texted the CEO. I said, hey, if you want this wire to go out, you need to call me now.
Yeah.
And he said, what wire? And I went,
no.
oh. That was about 10 years ago. And then, I've just seen some increasingly sophisticated email phishing.
Yeah.
So make it into my inbox somehow.
Well, and then a lot of it's, as you said, is AI driven. And there's a lot of AI going on out there. There's something called shadow AI. Have you heard of that yet?
No.
But
okay. I'm so excited to.
I'm revealing it to you live. Well, shadow AI is people in your organization who are using AI tools with no governance and no oversight.
Oh, yeah.
It's not about being malicious. It's just about people trying to be more productive, but doing it with, in some ways they're playing with fire and they don't even know it, depending on, what they're up to, what kind of data is involved. And so it's interesting because some people say to me, well, we don't allow AI by policy, so I'm sure no one's using it, or maybe one or two. And I cannot buy into that. That's not believable to me. So yeah, that's what shadow AI is. And I think we're going to have years of that ahead of us, unfortunately, because this stuff's seeping up through the floorboards of our organizations, right? It's showing up as features and products we've used for years that we never asked for. And so how can you say it's not being used? It's just beyond me.
Yeah, acceleration of rate of change.
Yeah, right.
And it's just outpacing. It's outpacing.
Our ability to keep up.
Yeah, from an economic perspective.
Yeah. Well, that brings us full circle. Thank you, James, for being here. That wraps up this episode of the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. Today, we talked about how CISOs and CFOs can actually communicate about cyber risk. And we covered things like the carpets and diamonds test for how do you learn to trust an expert when you don't understand anything about the subject matter? And we talked about how the scale of a company changes everything about risk management. And we got really specific about some kinds of things that are going on. James, thanks for joining me. If people want to find out more about you and your work, should we put your website in the show notes? How would you like people to reach out?
Absolutely. they can reach out via our website at kept.pro.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks again, James, for being here. We'll see you later, everybody.